Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Seattle Seahawks 2024 schedule. We're going to give you the lowest possible floor and the highest maximum ceiling of their record that you can expect this season. But before we get into that, if you have not already, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the Tracy Take, and also tackle that bell to get notified when new videos come out. The NFL season is right around the corner, and when week one rolls around, Ryan and I, we will be releasing weekly prediction videos of all of the Seattle Seahawks games that you're not going to want to miss. So go ahead and subscribe and tackle that bell to get notified when those videos come out. And Ryan, before we get into the schedule here, let's quickly kind of recap what the Seahawks improved on in the offense in the offseason. I'll mention offense because I was going to bring up, I think they made a concerted effort to keep improving the offensive line, especially on the interior offensive line. Actually, I'd say interior offensive line. I think just interior overall. I mean, going and getting Byron Murphy with your first overall pick, I think a concerted effort to just try and beef up just the defensive line overall. They were 21st in passing allowed, 31st in rushing yards allowed, which I think is actually even more of an indicator on the overall defensive line performance. They were 12th in sacks, which is good. But I think beefing up the running game, because as well, too, if you go look at this division, you got Chris McCaffrey. You're going to have Arizona Cardinals, who had a top 5 run offense last year. And, man, that Rams offense, when Kyron Williams was on the field, and then with how speedy they are on the outside, you couldn't just pack the box and try and prevent the run, because then they would just throw all over you. So Seahawks really need to make this concerted effort out. Do you agree with that? What are some other areas do you believe that they improved on this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interior were the big places that they wanted to address. I think this secondary room probably got a little bit better just depth-wise and health-wise. So they already have Reek Woolen. They got Devon Witherspoon. Both guys were kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit last year. Then they went out. They got Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James with pretty good value picks there at the end of the year. So all in all, I think they've just done a good job of kind of building up some depth here. And also, like, they had Drew Lock as their backup last year. These were more marginal moves, but going and getting Sam Howell, who has some developmental upside. They also brought in PJ Walker, who has had some success as a rotational starter in the NFL, and mainly I believe the UFL was where his big claim to fame was. But so all in all, I think they've just done a good job of building the best 53-man football team that they can. My big thing, as not to kind of preface, I said that they were going to go 9-8 in our record predictions that we did in our last video series. My biggest thing is everybody talks about how Geno Smith can be so healthy and whatnot, but I go and you look at his stats. So in 2022, he threw for 4,200 yards. Was averaging about 7.5 yards per attempt, threw 30 touchdowns with 11 interceptions. Well, last year, and he played in 17 games in 2022. In 2023, he played in 15 games, so 2 less games. He threw for 3,600 yards. He averaged 7.3 yards per completion. He threw 20 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. If you go on like a per game basis, it's pretty close. And I know his QBR ratings and things were like a couple points less here or there from 2022 to 2023. I just don't know with him at quarterback, how good can this team actually be? And that's my big question, I think, going into
with him at quarterback?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's interesting. It's interesting because we'll get into it now. When you're making those points, you were convincing me. I was like, okay, it's actually Geno Smith is a solid NFL quarterback. It's the other areas. It's the other areas that the Seahawks need to improve on, such as they were 28th in rushing, and you have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah.
And that's where I think. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, but so my thing is I think those are good starter numbers. Like that is probably puts them in the top 15, top 18 starters in the league. But I mean, like, if you look at the Seahawks record of the last couple seasons, they've been one of the top 15, top 18 teams. And I know some of that has been they've struggled in the trenches a lot. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, as we go through this, do we really feel that will change as we get into the record prediction and the floor and ceiling?
Well, and that's right. And I'm pulling up a comparison here right now, so I'm very curious to kind of go and see. But not only just as a player, but also as a whole team, you kind of just go look at this. But Seattle and Tampa Bay are almost identical, and especially even if you go look at the career path of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield last year, 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I think what was the completion, average completion yardage? You said
7.3 was last year. It was the average yards per attempt.
His was 11.1, so maybe a little bit more efficient. But even you go look at the receiving room, you go look at the way the offensive line was built. They both really struggled in the running game as a whole.
Yeah,
both of those things, because that was where my comp was, or I guess is now going to be just on these two teams. Because to me, I don't think the issue with Seattle isn't Geno Smith. I think Geno Smith is fine. He's a middle of the road quarterback, just like Baker Mayfield. And he's going to provide you good serviceable minutes. It's going to be better than somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the issue is, though, is they need to get more balance. And I think in some of the areas that we've discussed as well, like they improved the trenches on both sides of the ball. And they have great running backs in Kenneth Murray and Zach Charbonnet. Great one-two tandem. Kenneth Murray's a linebacker. But I think when we going into the schedule here now, though, if those improvements pay dividends and they can be a more average running team, I think we'll see that in their records, just because in their first 6 games, they're going to have a good overall balance of horrible teams and good teams. But week 1, Denver, that's one of the horrible teams, just to clarify. Week 2 at New England, once again, one of the other horrible teams. Week 3, hosting Miami. Week 4 at Detroit on Monday Night Football. Week 5, hosting the Giants. And then week 6, hosting San Francisco on a shortened week. So literally facing 3 probably some of the worst teams in the league and 3 of some of the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
So they're going to get a good overall balance. But to me, I think like worst case scenario, 3-3 during this stretch. I think best case scenario, they beat Detroit last year at Detroit. And I will say as well, too, I think they've improved the defense overall. I think they can beat Miami. They're going to struggle with San Francisco. San Francisco just had their number, I think, for the longest time. Love to hear in the comments if you guys think that they can win. But to me, I think 3-3 and 5-1. I mean, I think that's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, 3-3, 5-1. I think that is a very good start for them. I do think you look at like New England and the Giants, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I think both of those teams are pretty built up. New England was, I think, the 2nd or 3rd best rushing defense last year. The Giants at the end of the season had a pretty good defense. They should win those games, but that will be a good test, I think, to gauge where this offensive running game is for the Seahawks. So
I agree with
let's move on to the second set of 6 games here, kicking off with the Seahawks traveling to your Atlanta Falcons in week 7. Then they're hosting Buffalo and the Rams in weeks 8 and 9. They have a bye in week 10. And then to close out this stretch, they go to San Francisco coming off a bye, and then they host Arizona in week 12. I mean, I would say I think 3-2 is probably the ceiling. They got a couple tough road games, especially coming off a bye. But I think Buffalo, LA, and Arizona are teams that they can beat. My only thing is with the floor is like I could see legit scenarios where they lose all 5 of these games.
I would say I'll throw in. I mean, they could beat Atlanta. I'm being honest. It'll be a good test on their defensive interior. I will say if they've improved that defensive line. But I still think 3-2. I was going to say I think Buffalo could be the team, or the Rams could be the team that beat them. Once again, I just don't think they're going to be able to beat San Francisco. I'll agree with you in 3-2, just different on the overall team. I will say I think they'll win a game in this stretch. I mean,
1 of 4.
Yeah, I think 1 of 4. I mean, technically they could lose to Arizona. I mean, Arizona's going to be much improved, and very curious to see how they develop. And come week 12, it's possible that I'm picking Arizona over them, depending on how both teams play. But even during that stretch, I still think they can beat the Rams, and even they played hard against the Rams, not in week 1, but they played hard. I think that was when we got introduced to Puka Nacua. But like
160 yards,
something like that. So I think they'll win one of those games. It is still divisional games. I know I said for almost a shadow of a doubt they're not going to beat San Francisco, but luckily for them, they don't have to play them anymore in the final 6 games. Week 13 is at the Jets. Week 14 at Arizona. Week 15 hosting Green Bay on Sunday Night Football. Week 16 hosting Minnesota. Week 17 at Chicago. And week 18 at the Los Angeles Rams. Luckily for them, that will be pretty much a home game because fans in LA don't show up to SoFi. So I would say kind of a mixed reaction overall. I think maybe like a ceiling. I think they'll lose to Green Bay. I mean, in theory, technically, to me, I think it's gonna be tough. I think its ceiling is gonna be 4-2. I
Yeah,
think floor is gonna be 2-4.
yeah, I agree with that because I think Minnesota, Arizona are the two games I'm circling that I think could be the wins.
Yeah.
Chicago, I think, is going to be a coin flip, and the Jets, it might be a coin flip. But Green Bay and LA are going to be two good teams that I think are going to be tough to beat, especially at. I know it's probably you made the joke that LA fans don't show up. It is still at LA. There's still travel involved. It's going to be indoors where it's set up for that offense as well.
Oh
So
yeah,
I
atrocious.
I agree. 4-2 and 2-4 as the ceiling and floor there. What is their overall floor and ceiling?
Their floor is 6-11, and then their ceiling's 12-5.
Okay.
You had them going 9-8 in our record prediction in the offseason recap. I had them going 10-7, and to be honest, I'm still kind of sticking with our record predictions.
Yeah.
Well, it's the middle of the bell curve overall. I think most likely kind of combination scenarios. But I just think that's what this team overall is going. I think they're just going to be average. I think they're going to be one of the fringe playoff teams if they could stay healthy. And actually, I don't want to say fringe. I think if the playoffs were held right now, I think they would be one of the 7 teams to get it. I don't think they'll win the division, but I still think they'll be one of the 7 teams because I think that's just kind of where they're right on that path. If they're not 7, then they're going to be 8. Right?
Yeah.
I think they're like, let's say, so San Francisco, and I'll say the Rams, Detroit, Green Bay, Dallas, or Philadelphia. I'll say that. And then Atlanta or Tampa Bay or someone from the NFC South. So that's 6. I think that they could be in the 7th. There's a couple of other spots, like I mentioned. The loser of Dallas or Philly could be in there. The loser of Atlanta or Tampa Bay could potentially be in there, the 7th spot. And there are a couple other teams like maybe you want to like we could potentially include Chicago, but there's still a lot of unknowns with Chicago.
Yeah.
I think for what we know, I think Seattle is that 7th team. I think they're kind of vying for that final spot. And that's just when I look at this record, I think they're still going to kind of fall into that position.
Yeah, and that is another thing too that we didn't really factor in or touch on yet is the coaching changes that were made. Interested to see how that plays a role. The Washington offensive coordinator from last year in college football is now making his pro debut as the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. What is the name of their new head coach?
Mike Macdonald.
Mike Macdonald. I kept want to say McDaniel, but that's the Dolphins.
I kept want to say Tom McDonald, but like that's the rapper.
Oh,
that's not.
So interested to see how those changes go. But yeah, I agree. I think this is just going to be one of those teams. They're going to be vying for one of the wild card spots. The NFC is slowly, I think, catching up with the AFC in terms of just depth of overall teams, where you have 12 teams, 14 teams that are really realistically vying for a playoff spot.
Which is then wild too. Then if you look at it from a whole picture, in fact, now there's like 20 teams that are legitimate Super Bowl. That has a legitimate shot at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's going to be wild.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up here. Please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you think the Seattle Seahawks floor and ceiling will be in 2024. And other than that, we will see you guys next time.